The timestamp was 11:51 p.m. outside. A blizzard was burying Denver in white silence. But inside my apartment, the only thing I felt was the cold blue light of my phone. The text message from my mother, Susan, sat on the screen like a verdict. She wrote, "Your father and I agree. Until you fund Chloe's engagement party, don't bother coming to the Aspen Gala. You're ruining this family." I didn't even have a second to absorb the cruelty before another notification lit up the screen. Instagram. My sister Chloe had uploaded a photo of the venue. All chandeliers and polished marble, with a caption that landed like a blade between my ribs. Finally got rid of the negative energy. Blessed. I caught my reflection in the dark gloss of my laptop screen. I waited for tears. I waited for panic to bloom in my chest. Neither arrived. What settled in instead was something sharper, colder clarity. I didn't respond. I opened my laptop. Before I tell you what I did next, let me ask you something. Have you ever been the one covering the bills but treated like an unwanted guest in your own family? Drop a comment and tell me where you're listening from. I want to know who's here with me tonight. The apartment was frigid. I kept the heat at 62 to cut costs, a habit carved into me years ago, while I quietly paid to warm a 5-bedroom house in Aspen I didn't even live in. I tightened the blanket around my shoulders, but my fingers stayed bare above the keyboard. They weren't shaking. They were calm, precise, like a surgeon about to make the first cut. I didn't start with anger. I didn't fire back a text. I went to the cloud. I logged into the family's shared administrative dashboard, a digital blueprint of my own exploitation. Passwords, autopay confirmations, linked accounts. Every convenience in their lives traced back to my bank account. First, Richard, my father. I clicked on the tab labeled emergency card. 3 years ago, I had opened that line of credit strictly for what he called life or death situations. I pulled up the last 30 days of transactions. The list scrolled endlessly. Liquor stores, cigar lounges, premium steakhouses. Not one hospital. Not one pharmacy. Just over $1,000 of indulgence financed by my overtime. I didn't feel rage. I felt clinical. I opened card management, selected report lost or stolen. Then, close account permanently. The screen asked for confirmation. I clicked yes. The digital card faded to gray. Somewhere in Aspen, the plastic in his wallet became a useless scrap. Next, KHLOE. I opened the automotive leasing portal. The pearl white luxury SUV she drove was legally mine. I had signed because her credit score didn't exist, and she had sworn to make the payments. 14 months later, she hadn't paid a cent. The make payment button blinked. Due tomorrow. Instead, I navigated to lease termination. The early termination fee was steep, punishing. But compared to the erosion of my self-respect, it was affordable. I selected voluntary surrender. Entered my parents' driveway as the pickup address. Scheduled the tow for Monday morning. A final prompt appeared. Are you sure you want to terminate this agreement? Yes, I whispered to the empty room and pressed confirm. Finally, the house. The winter gala was in full swing. Powered by electricity I funded, heated by gas billed to my account, streamed over internet service charged directly to my debit card. I logged into the utility provider not to shut anything off. That would have been illegal. Instead, I chose something slower, more permanent. I went to billing, removed my primary checking account, deleted the backup savings card, unchecked paperless billing, switched notifications to mail only, set the account to cash on delivery. The next invoice wouldn't disappear quietly into my account. It would arrive in their mailbox, thick, red, undeniable. I leaned back. The only glow in the room was the pulsing sleep light on my laptop, blinking steadily like a heartbeat. The silence that usually felt hollow now felt loaded. In under 12 minutes, I had severed the 3 main arteries feeding their lifestyle. I closed my eyes and listened to the wind claw at the windows. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was the storm. People always ask how you let it get this far. They tally the numbers $82,000 over a decade and wonder if you were foolish, naive, spineless. They don't understand the mechanics of normalized cruelty. You don't wake up and hand over your savings to people who resent you. It happens gradually, incrementally, like the boiling frog experiment, except the water was my bank account. I sat in the dark remembering the first rise in temperature. 5 years ago, Richard needed emergency back surgery. He had no insurance. He didn't believe in paying scammers, as he liked to say. The bill was $25,000. I was 24, driving a Honda Civic with a duct-taped bumper. Living on ramen 5 nights a week to build a cushion against disaster. When the invoice came, they didn't ask. They stared. Susan cried at the kitchen table, eyes glossy and expectant. Richard reclined in his chair, groaning theatrically, wondering aloud whether he'd end up in a wheelchair because some people were too selfish to help. I paid. One wire transfer. Entire savings account gone. I thought I was buying his recovery. I thought I was purchasing gratitude. I was wrong. I was paying a tax for existing under their roof. There was no thank you, only assumption. And I paid again, and again, then came Chloe, the entrepreneur. 2 years ago, she needed $30,000 to launch a lifestyle brand. She pitched it to me over a dinner I covered, tossing around words like vision and disruption. I knew the plan was flimsy. I knew she had never held a 40-hour work week, but Richard and Susan boxed me in. They accused me of jealousy, said I was crushing her dreams because I was a bitter corporate drone. They wore me down until signing the check felt easier than resisting. The money evaporated within 6 months. No product, no receipts, no explanation. That's the trap. You believe that if you give enough, someday the void inside them will fill, and they will finally see you. But you aren't filling a void, you're digging your own grave, sitting in the cold quiet of my apartment. I understood something. I had been trained for this, conditioned. Since childhood, my value had been transactional. Chloe was adored for her beauty. Richard was revered as the patriarch. I was tolerated because I was useful. I was their insurance policy, but even the most conditioned survivor reaches a threshold. Tonight's text wasn't just cruel. It was the final degree of heat. The water didn't just simmer. It turned to steam. The frog wasn't boiling anymore. The frog had kicked over the pot. Morning crept over the Denver skyline, turning gray snow into blinding slush. But the real storm was inside my phone. I had silenced notifications, yet I could see them stacking up on the lock screen like drifts. 35 missed calls. 62 text messages. The first voicemail was from Chloe. I pressed play. Soft, expensive chimes echoed in the background. Some bridal boutique. Then her voice, tight and shrill. You humiliated me in front of the consultant. The card declined. It declined. Do you know what humiliation tastes like? Fix it. Now. No concern. No confusion. No thought that maybe something had happened. To me, only outrage from a parasite who'd lost its host. Next was Susan. Her voice messages were always theatrical, breathless, soaked in tears. Emma, you're killing him. He's clutching his chest. He looks gray. If he has another heart attack, that's on you. Send the gala money back. We have guests arriving. Please, Emma, don't be a monster. Then Richard, he didn't call. He sent a photo, a close-up of his blood pressure monitor. 180 over. 110. Underneath. A single sentence. Look at what you're doing to this family. I sat at my kitchen table with a mug of black coffee, watching the messages flood in. I searched for certain words. Are you okay? What's wrong? Let's talk. They never appeared. In there. World, I wasn't a daughter. I wasn't a sister. I was infrastructure. An appliance. You don't ask a toaster why it stopped working. You don't ask a refrigerator whether it feels appreciated. You kick it. You shake it. You scream at it until it does its job. For the first time in 29 years, I didn't feel the urge to fix it. I didn't feel the familiar tug of guilt in Mistamac telling me to apologize and smooth things over. I felt a profound quiet detachment. I realized I had spent my entire life making coffee for them in me head, anticipating their needs, managing their moods, warming their world before they even woke up. I took a sip of my own coffee. It was bitter and hot. I decided right then that I was done making theirs. I didn't block their numbers. That would have been an emotional reaction, a retreat. Instead, I muted the notifications and opened a new window on my browser. I treated Themmerning not as a family crisis, but as a hostile corporate takeover. In my Linioff work, when a department is bleeding cash and refusing accountability, you didn't argue with the managers, you audit them. I put on my coat and walked 3 blocks to the office supply store. I walked past the greeting cards and the gift wrap. I went straight to the organizational aisle. I bought a 3-in heavy-duty binder. I chose the color red, alert, emergency, stop. I bought a pack of reinforced dividers and a set of highlighters. When I got back to my desk, I printed everything. The printer hummed for 45 minutes straight. 10 years of bank statements, credit card stories, Venmo logs, wire transfer pipes. The paper stacked up warm and heavy. I punched holes in every sheet. I categorized them by year, then by recipient. 2018, the back surgery. 2020, the business loan. 2022, the mortgage risk. I slotted them into the binder, the metal rings snapping shut with a sound like a jail cell locking. On Thespini, I wrote 2 words in black permanent marker Project Independence. It was a physical manifestation of my invisible labor. When it was just numbers on a screen, it felt abstract, but sitting there on my desk, 3 in thickened, weighing 4 pounds. It was undeniable. It was a monument to my own exploitation. Then I made a phone call. I called Sarah, a forensic accountant I used to work with at a previous firm. We skipped that small talk. I need a favor, I said. I need you to trace a specific wire transfer from 2 years ago. $30,000. It was supposed to go to a medical collection agency for a hospital in Denver. I gave her the routing number and the date. Sarah didn't ask why I was auditing. My own father. She just typed, "Give me 24 hours," she said. Finally, I opened a word processor and drafted a formal document. It wasn't a letter to a sister. It was a notice of voluntary surrender regarding the SUV. I cited Thely's agreement terms, the lack of payment, and the scheduled repossession date. I attached a copy of the tow truck order. I didn't sign it. Love, Emma, isn't it? Emma Miller Lee. I printed E3 copies. One for me, one for the glove box, and one for the red binder. I ran my hand over the plastic cover off the binder. 4 years they had told me I was crazy. They told me I was cheap. They told me I was imagining things, but facts don't imagine. Math doesn't gaslight. This binder was my shield. And tomorrow night at the gala, it was going to be my sword. 24 hours later, my phone rang. It was Sarah. I picked up on the first ring, my pen hovering over a fresh legal pad. "Tell me," I said. There was a pause on the other end, the kind of heavy static-filled silence that usually precedes a death notification. "Emma," Sarah said, her voice stripped of its usual professional detachment. "You are sitting down, right?" "I'm standing." "Just tell me." "Okay, the wire transfer for $30,000. The routing number didn't go to a medical collections agency. It went to a holding account for a title company in downtown Denver." The room seemed to tilt slightly to the left. "A title company for what?" I pulled the public property records that matched the transaction date, she continued. 2 days after you wired the money to your father. A down payment of exactly $30,000 was recorded for on it at the Glass Works. It's a luxury condo building in the London district. She took a breath. "The deed isn't in your father's name, Emma. It's in close." I didn't drop the phone. I didn't scream. I felt a wave of nausea all through my stomach, hot and acidic, but I swallowed it down. I walked over to the window and looked out at the city. 2 years ago, Richard had led me weeping.
He said the surgeons were threatening to send his debt to collectors. He said they would garnish his pension. He said he was terrified.
I had drained my emergency fund. I had canceled my vacation. I had driven a car with no heat for a winter so I could save him, and he hadn't used a cent of it for his back. He had taken my sacrifice and used it to buy my sister a view of the mountains. "Are you sure?" I asked, though I already knew she was. I'm looking at the digital copy of Thetid right now, Sarah said. Richard Ice listed as the guarantor, but Chloe is primary owner. The down payment matches your transfer to the penny. Send it to me, I said. Send me everything. The email arrived 10 seconds later. I opened the attachment. There it was. The official county record. Owner Chloe Miller. Property value $600,000. I stared. At her signature on the bottom line, a loopy, childish scrawl that I had paid $30,000 to authorize. This wasn't just favoritism anymore. It wasn't just toxic family dynamics. This was fraud. This was theft. He had looked at me in the eye, played on my fear of his death, and robbed me to fund her lifestyle. I printed the deed. The paper was still warm from the printer as I punched 3 holes in the side. I opened the red binder to the section labeled 2020. I placed the deed directly on top of the wire transfer receipt. The evidence was complete. The nausea faded, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. That felt like iron settling in my spine, they thought. I was just a bitter daughter who had cut off the allowance. They had no idea. I was the prosecutor who had just found the smoking gun. I didn't drive to Aspen. I didn't put on a gown. And I didn't storm the ballroom to make a scene. That would have given them exactly what they wanted, a reaction, a villain they could point to and call hysterical. Instead, I sat on my couch with a glass of cheap wine and opened my laptop. Chloe was live streaming. Thetid was high broadcasting to her 12,000 followers. The ballroom was bathed in gold light. There was a jazz band playing in the corner. Richard washled in court near the bar, wearing a tuxedo that cost more than my first car. Susan was laughing, clutching a glass of champagne, playing the role of the benevolent matriarch. Chloe was in the center of the frame, twirling in a white dress, telling her audience how blessed she felt to be surrounded by generosity and love. It was a perfect performance, but that is the thing about power built in someone else's money. It is an illusion. It is a house of cards standing in a wind tunnel waiting for Somion to open the door, and at 8:15 p.m. the door opened. A man walked into the frame. He wasn't a guest. He was a courier from a private process service dressed in a sharp, dark uniform. Hadn't looked at the cameras. He walked straight through the crowd, parting thesia of black-tie guests, like a shark moving through a school of fish. He stopped in front of Richard. The jazz band faltered. Chloe stopped twirling. The comment section on the live stream started asking, "Who is that?" The courier handed Richard a heavy package. It wasn't wrapped in a bow. It was third binder. Then he handed Chloe a tablet. I picked up my phone. I sent a single message to the family group chat. Check the tablet. Page 4. The condo down. Payment. On my screen, I watched its notification pop up on Chloe's phone, which she was using to livestream. She frowned, confused. She looked down at the tablet the courier had given her. At the same time, Richard opened the red binder. I saw the color drain from his face in real time. It was in a gradual realization. It was an instant collapse. He saw the bank statements. He saw the liquor store tracking. He saw the forensic audit off $30,000 he stole. Susan tried to grab the binder, her smile twisting into panic. But it was Chloe's reaction that satisfied me most. She stared at Thetid on the tablet, the proof that her lifestyle was funded by fraud committed against her own sister. She looked up at camera, realizing the stream was still running, realizing that the guests around her were whispering, realizing that the medical debt lie was dead. This is the fragility of false status. When you build your identity on resources you do not own, you are always one audit away from bankruptcy. They looked powerful 5 minutes ago, but without missiles holding them up, they were just thieves and rented tuxedos. Chloe longed for the phone. The live stream cut to black. The show was over. But in my apartment, the silence wasn't lonely anymore. It was the sound of a gavel coming down. The fallout wasn't loud. It was a series of quiet administrative ortric. Richard tried to call Meth next morning, but he reached a disconnected line message. I had changed me number at 9 a.m. The luxury sub was loaded onto a flatbed tow truck. 3 days later, I received the confirmation mail from the leasing agency. While I was eating lunch, The condo in London was listed for sale by the end of the week. They had to liquidate the asset to pay back the loan I had exposed or face a fraud investigation. I sat in my apartment. My bank account was lighter be $82,000. That money was gone, burned on the altar of their entitlement. I would never get it back. But as I looked around my quiet, cold living room, I realized I had purchased something far more valuable than a condo or a gala ticket. I had bought my own life back. I opened my laptop one last time. I didn't log into their accounts. I logged into a travel site. I booked a cabin in the mountains for next weekend. Not in Aspen, somewhere quiet, somewhere with no signal. Just me, the snow, and vigilance I had finally earned. To everyone watching this, I want to speak to you directly. To the invisible children, to the fixers, to the ones who think that if you just pay one more bill or solve one more crisis or swallow one more insult, they will finally love you. They won't. Love is not a subscription service. You cannot buy your way into a family that is committed to misunderstanding you. The most expensive thing you will ever pay for is a relationship that costs you your dignity. I spent a decade trying to better safety net, and they used it to strangle me. Don't wait for the thank you. It isn't coming. Close the account. Change the locks. Let the calls go to voicemail. You are not a wallet. You are a person and you have the right to be free. If this story spoke to you, if you are the one holding the weight of your family's expectations, please share this video. Let's remind every silent ATM out there that they have the right to close the account. You are not alone.